Most people know Phil Robertson as the camo-wearing patriarch of Duck Dynasty, but the personal transformation he carried into his final chapters reveals a side of the Duck Commander that the cameras never captured. You see the beard, you see the tea glass, you hear the catchphrases, happy, happy, happy. But for a long time, Phil Robertson wasn't happy. He was dangerous. We love the story of the wise old grandfather sitting on his porch, handing out life lessons like candy. It feels safe, it feels warm. But if you want the real story, the one he took to his grave, you have to go back to a time when Phil Robertson wasn't a celebrity. He was a man you would cross the street to avoid. The internet will tell you he played football, that he started ahead of Terry Bradshaw, that he quit the NFL to hunt ducks. And sure, that's true. But that's the clean version. That's the version that fits on a poster. The truth is much darker. When Phil walked away from football, he didn't just walk into the woods. He walked into a different world. He became what the locals called a river rat. And this wasn't a cute nickname. It was a warning. Picture the Louisiana swamps in the 1970s. Heat that sticks to your skin. Water black as oil. Phil wasn't just hunting ducks, he was running from everything. He rented a honky-tonk bar. He decided that the rules of society didn't apply to him anymore. He began to drink, not just a beer after work. We are talking about a darkness that swallows a man whole. He wasn't the funny uncle. He was the guy who would get into a bar fight, beat a man down, and then go looking for the next one. There is a specific story that Phil rarely spoke about in detail, but it chills the bone. He was commercial fishing on the river. This was his livelihood. He worked hard to catch those fish, but other men, river rats like him, started stealing his catch. Now, a normal man calls the police. A normal man shouts a warning. Phil Robertson was not a normal man. He didn't call the sheriff. He grabbed his shotgun. He hid in the brush, waiting for the thieves to come back. He wasn't planning to scare them. He was planning to end them. He later admitted that he sat there, finger on the trigger, telling himself, the next person who moves dies. That is not the Duck Commander. That is a man standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to jump. He didn't pull the trigger that day, but he did something worse to his own family. The anger and the whiskey took over. He became so mean, so vile, that he kicked his own wife, Miss Kay, and their young sons out of the house. Imagine that. The family you see praying at the dinner table on TV? There was a night where Phil Robertson looked at them and told them to get out. He told them he didn't need them. He chose the bottle and the swamp over his own blood. Miss Kay left. She had to. And Phil was alone. This is where the story usually pivots to a happy ending. But not yet. Phil spent months in the woods. He lived like an animal. He slept in a hole in the ground, essentially. No family, no future. Just him, the river, and the demons in his head. He thought he was free. He thought he was living the ultimate life of a mountain man. But then the silence gets loud. You can only run from yourself for so long before you hit a wall. For Phil, that wall was a parking lot. He went to find Miss Kay. He waited by her work. When she came out, she didn't see the monster who kicked her out. She saw a broken man. He was weeping. The tough guy, the quarterback, the river rat. He was crying like a child. He told her, "I can't eat. I can't sleep. I want my family back." But here is the twist. He didn't just need his family back. He needed to die. Not physically, but the man he was, the drinker, the fighter, the angry soul, that man had to die. A preacher named Bill Smith had tried to talk to Phil before. Phil had run him off, cursed him, kicked him out of his bar. But now Phil was desperate. He went to find that preacher. And this is the part of the transformation that most people miss. It wasn't just about believing. It was about understanding how lost he really was. Phil asked the preacher to explain the gospel. He said he didn't know what it was. Think about that. A grown man in the South, surrounded by churches, and he had no idea what Jesus actually did. The preacher explained it simply. God came down, died for you, rose again. Phil looked at him and said, "How in the world did I miss that?" He realized he had been fighting a war he couldn't win. He had been trying to be the toughest thing in the swamp, but he was just a scared kid in a grown man's body. They went to the water, the same river where he used to fish, the same water where he almost killed men, and Phil Robertson went under. When he came up, the river rat stayed down there. This is the secret he took to his grave. The Phil Robertson you watched on TV was a ghost. He was the man who survived. The real Phil Robertson, the one born in 1946, died in that river in the 70s. The man who climbed out of the water was someone else entirely. For the rest of his life, Phil lived with a specific intensity that people mistook for grumpiness. It wasn't grumpiness, it was focus. He knew how close he had come to hell. He knew he should have been in prison or dead in a ditch. Every time he spoke about faith, he wasn't just reciting a verse. He was talking about the lifeline that pulled him out of the mud. He stopped drinking, cold turkey. He put down the rage. He picked up his Bible, and he picked up his duck calls. But the transformation wasn't instant magic. He had to earn his family back. He had to prove to Miss Kay that the monster was gone. He had to show his boys that their father was a new man. And he did it. Day by day, duck call by duck call. Years later, when the cameras showed up, they wanted to film a reality show about a redneck family. They wanted drama. They wanted fighting. But Phil gave them something else. He gave them a prayer. At the end of every episode, the family gathered. They bowed their heads, and Phil prayed. The network executives didn't like it. They said, "Cut the prayer. It's too religious. It will offend people." And this is where the old Phil and the new Phil combined. The old Phil, the stubborn, unmovable rock, came out. But instead of fighting for a fish, he fought for his faith. He told them, no prayer, no show. He was willing to walk away from millions of dollars. He was willing to walk away from fame. Why? Because he remembered the parking lot. He remembered the darkness. He knew that the only reason he was sitting at that table, eating that food, surrounded by those kids, was because of what happened in that river. He wasn't going to hide the thing that saved him. In his final years, as his memory began to fade and his health declined, Phil didn't cling to the fame. He didn't care about the money. He went back to the basics. He spoke about the Grim Reaper. He talked about death constantly, not with fear, but with anticipation. He would tell anyone who would listen, "I'm just passing through." He knew the truth. He knew that the Duck Dynasty empire wasn't his legacy. The camouflage wasn't his legacy. His legacy was the fact that a man can be completely 100% dead in his sins and be brought back to life. When he passed, people mourned the TV star, but the people who knew him best, Miss Kay, Jace, Willie, Jep, they didn't mourn the TV star. They celebrated the miracle. They knew who sat at their table for 40 years. It wasn't the river rat. It was the man God made out of the pieces. So when you think of Phil Robertson, don't just think of the beard or the ducks. Think of the parking lot. Think of the desperate man crying for his wife. And think of the moment he decided that the only way to live was to let his old self die. That is the transformation he took to his grave. And that is the real story of the Duck Commander.